Right, hello everyone, it's Antony Carpen here at the junction in Cambridge, and I'm old enough to remember actually when this place used to be a functioning cattle market where they would sell livestock. But this bit that we're in now is the relatively recent part, the Junction 2 or the J2 bit. The bit over there is the original part that was built in 1990 on the back of a series of protests by some local teenagers who were complaining quite rightly that we didn't have any leisure venues for young people in particular to make music and art, because in the 1980s, or rather in the 1970s and 80s in particular, a whole host of community venues basically shut for, amongst other reasons, lack of money at a time of big economic strife. Anyway, that's something I think for a separate blog post and vlog post to do with all things Lost Cambridge, which is coming on all things great. So we're hoping to have an event I hope to be able to talk about in the next week or so, fingers crossed. Anyway, I've just signed up for membership with the junction, not least because I've just gone and bought a whole load of tickets. So Mark Thomas is coming back here, which is splendid because he always does a really good show here, and this one he's going to be talking about the NHS at 70. Now, the last time I spoke to him when he came here, politics was really imploding in a very, very big way. And I was just like, Mark, what the hell is going on? And it was just really interesting to get his insights of what was going on, given where he's based, and also because he goes obviously around the country on tour. Have a look at his book, 101 Acts of Minor Dissent, I think it is. But it'll be really interesting actually to see if the Extinction Rebellion people actually pick up on the ideas that him and Vanessa Fury and a whole host of others tried out. Talking of his friends, this crew are back. It's under the title Lefty Scum, but it's actually Johnny and the Baptists, Josie Long and Gracie Petrie. Now, when Grace and Josie were here, I think it must have been in the early part of this decade, I think 2011, 2012. It was an absolute riot, and it was brilliant because I'd been familiar with Josie for quite some time, but I'd never heard Grace before, and her music and her lyrics were just so in your face in a really brilliant way, because I think in a way because it was around the start of austerity. I think a lot of us were waiting to see or wanting for protest music to come back, and I think certainly throughout the previous decade of the 2000s there wasn't really that much going around. Another act that I've got tickets for, or a ticket for, is Luca Rutherford's Political Party. I've not heard of Luca before, but it involves a mixture of kind of like comedy music, and it says drinks, dancing and eggs. I don't intend to be throwing lots around myself, but it looks like an absolute riot as well. The other couple of acts that I've also got tickets for, one is let's see, no, I've not got them in there. One is Lucy Porter again, who's kind of a veteran of TV now. It seems like she's been around for absolutely ages. And I first saw her at a theatre in, I think it was at the Soho Theatre in London, because I was living in London at the time. And I think it was one of the first times I'd seen a comedy act that I'd seen on telly before, or I'd seen on the internet also a lot, but had been kind of like face to face. And then I think a few years ago, the first time I saw it here at the junction, I brought Puffles along, and then brought Puffles along again when we also had the then Mayor of Cambridge, Councillor Jerry Bird, also here. So it'll be great to see Lucy back again. We've also got Ellie Taylor, who has seemingly come from nowhere to be one of the co-stars on the Daily Mash TV show on BBC Two, and I've been basically following the Daily Mash online, and it's basically started off life as one of these online newspapers which just takes the piss out of really crap reporting, as well as events such as Brexit broflakes like Piers Morgan basically saying, well, I'm going to this year go around defending everyone because you're all snowflakes, and then the next thing that happens today is Greg's, the pastry makers and sandwich retailers, basically saying, yep, we've got some vegan sausage rolls to sell, and he then squeals and basically says this is an outrage. So and the videos that Ellie's produced and that she's started in particular for the Daily Mash TV have just been absolutely brilliant and deadpan, because it's have a look at them yourself. I mean, the one for me that really stands out just in a really big way is women everywhere have told men just to fuck off. And then goes on to list kind of like Daily Mail headlines about how horrible women supposedly are, and not applying that same standard to men everywhere. And given how we've seen the very, very ugly side of the internet and social media and of humanity kind of in the past few years, perhaps that we weren't willing to accept, if I can put it that way. 2019, I think, is going to be a very, very important year. And I think that's one of the reasons also why a lot of the comedy acts that I've bought tickets for have basically been for women comedians, because in the grand scheme of things, and I've been very critical of the Junction here in the past for over this, is I basically said, look, I'm just bored of public school educated comedians just dominating everything, because, you know, as the numbers show, only 6-7% of people actually have a public school education, and if that's all that's coming out from the comedy scene, then, you know, it's not reflecting of the lives that many of us are leading. So it's really good to see the Junction have, for this season, and I hope it continues, have really diversified on their comedy acts. So yeah, do pop along to the Junction for those of you who are in or around Cambridge, junction.co.uk. So see you soon.